Hey there, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk build strategy for Ford 6R140 transmissions. So this particular unit that you see all apart in front of me ready to go back together is out of a 2019 F450 with a 6.7 diesel. But pretty much most of, if not all, what I'll cover in this video is going to apply to diesel or gas. Just 6R140 with the scope of the build being stock to mild or moderate performance. Now, when it comes to these transmissions, they're already extremely heavy duty as it is from the factory. I mean, they're in all of the F-Series Super Duty trucks, all the diesel 6.7s take them, and the Boss 6.2 engines. So they're already built to handle a hell of a lot of power and torque. And so, I mean, unless you're doing something super wild and crazy, which is beyond the scope of this video, you really don't need to get too crazy or fancy when it comes to part selection. You just need to put everything together, both parts and procedures wise, in a fundamentally sound build. So I'll cover part selection. I'll also touch on specialty tooling as well, because there is some special tools that you're going to want to have, especially something to secure this transmission safely so that you can work on it, because these things are something like 350 or 375 pounds dry. I mean, they are massive, so you're going to need a specialized holding fixture, preferably mounted to an engine stand. I don't know that I would mount these to a bench unless it was like something really super heavy duty, like nothing I have in this shop. Bench wise, I would trust with this thing. So you see it there on the stand. I'll cover that toward the end of the video, but suffice to say, let's go ahead and get started. We'll basically begin with the fundamentals. And that is the hydraulic control. So over here you see the torque converter. There's a reman unit. My converter builder goes through all of my torque converters, including these, and makes them pretty much all new again, if not better than new from the factory. These are very good converters. Ford did a good job with them. You don't see, or at least I don't hear, too many instances of pattern failures with the torque converter on these units. I don't know if there are billet covers for these. I believe there is a billet backing plate that you can install. It is, I don't know, kind of labor intensive according to my converter builder. So if you have something really super duty, something like, maybe a truck that's tuned, it's got like a crazy tune putting out twice the amount of torque and power, and you're either racing it or doing tractor pulls, or something beyond the scope of what it was originally intended for, then you may want to upgrade to that billet backing plate. Beyond that, the factory converter as is should be good to go, and you can buy them from Ford or from wherever. The valve body, we installed a Sonex zip kit and a Central Valve Bodies oversized valving kit. At least a few of the valves that where the boards were worn, we were able to resuscitate those valve trains and restore sealing integrity using the parts from that Central Valve Bodies kit. So between that and the zip kit, we got the hydraulics covered, and we installed a new transmission temperature switch and all new solenoids as well. So I always recommend you install OEM or Rostra brand solenoids and or electronic products are perfectly fine. If you can't get Ford, or Ford's too expensive, I think the Rostra brand stuff is about 2/3 of the cost, and I've never ever had any issues with Rostra, so I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them. All right, and then as far as anything else is concerned with the valve body, just install everything that comes in your kits. No need to reuse anything other than the valves themselves, of course. All right, most of the time when these come in, if there's a soft part failure inside the case, maybe 3.5R or 4.56 clutch burnt up, you won't need a pump. The pumps are fairly resilient in these. You may see some wear here in the pump housing. This is a good used one. We did have a fair amount of scoring in the original. If you watch a teardown inspection video on the same transmission, you will have seen that the converter got really hot, and the 3.5R clutch burned, and the 1.234 clutch, aka forward clutch, welded itself together. And the reason that happened was because the driver of the truck was at a job site, his contractor vehicle, and he got stuck in the sand or mud, and he was trying to free himself, revving the engine up 3,500, 4,000 plus RPM, going nowhere fast. Unfortunately, that happens. So a lot of damage was sustained to the pump. So we just got a good used pump housing and a good used pump body with good used gears. And so you always want to replace your seal and then check your bearing. If this bearing's in good shape, it's not making any noise, you can go ahead and reuse it. Otherwise, just simply tap it out. You can get access to it back here with like either a really thin punch or a screwdriver, and just tap it out until it comes out. And then you'll seat it just like this, flush with the sealing surface for the front pump seal. Okay, your overall kit is going to come with a multitude of big seals. I think there's like 5 of them. Okay, it'll have this seal here, and then it will have 3 different output shaft seals. Since this is a 4x4, you're only going to use the big output shaft seal here. And the way I like to do it is I like to install the seal immediately after I install the output shaft nuts. Sorry about that, I didn't realize that was caught up. Alright, so I had my fabricator make me this seal driving tool. It'll slip right over the output shaft and install the seal. So you'll want something like this. There is a dealership tool. It's an OTC tool. I'll flash the tool number across the screen. But bottom line is you don't want the seal installed before you install that output shaft nut. All right, so here's the nut. Here's the washer, or the spacer, or the bearing race, whatever you would like to call it. So there's a bearing, and then that race, and then of course the nut. All right, we have all of our Teflon sealing rings for the stator as well as the turbine shaft, and then I have some bushing drivers specifically for, well, certain bushings obviously, and then I have this driver here, is also made by my fabricator. This is specifically to remove and reinstall the rear case needle bearing assemblies. There's 2 of them, and we have to install new ones onto this transmission because one of them, the inboard bearing, had one of the needles fall out, so that's not good. Alright, you have your wear plate and an O-ring. One thing that you want to have on the bench with you before you go back with any one of these clutch to clutch 6 speeds, and that is what I call selectives. So selectives are basically parts that are the exact same part, but they're of slightly different dimension, so that you can mix and match and swap them out for the purposes of dialing in either clutch clearance or case component travel, aka end play. And these transmissions, you got to measure end play in 2 separate locations. There's a rear end play measurement that you have to deal with, and then there's a front end play measurement. And so your front end play measurement is regulated by this selective spacer that sits on the stator and basically sits between the stator here, okay, stator here, and your sun gear in the front of the unit. So these are of all different thicknesses. You want to be between 6 and 18 thousandths for your front end play. And if you're replacing things like front planet and or sun gear and or pump assembly, case, drums, chances are, well, I wouldn't say chances are, but there is a possibility that you may have either too much or not enough travel based on the spacer that came out of the transmission initially. Okay, and that's a result of tolerance stacking. That's why these selectives exist. You know, it's going to be impossible to hold millions upon millions upon millions of individual parts in a transmission to something like a 6, 8, or 10 sigma level when it comes to their overall dimensions. Okay, there is no way to hold that level of precision. So what the engineers did is build into the design places where you can allow for tolerance stacking and make adjustments so that you have the right amount of travel or the right clutch clearance so that the transmission functions and lives as it was intended to. So that's the point of selectives, and that's why they exist in all automatic transmissions and I think manuals too. I don't do manuals much, so yeah, I think some manuals at least have selective components. So you want to have these on the bench with you. We have a bunch of snap rings for the clutch packs, and then we have selective spacers here for that stator. Okay, bolts and small parts. Let me talk real quick about specialty tools. These transmissions are somewhat tool intensive. Okay, the most critical, most important tool that you can have is your mounting fixture, whether it be something that's purpose built by tool makers, something that you had a fabricator make, like in my case, or something that's improvised, i.e. you make it, but as long as it's sturdy, it's good to go. If you're going to make something, make it such that it can withstand or handle at least 500 pounds. I like to have a nice buffer between how much something weighs and the load carrying capacity of a holding fixture. So 500 pounds, 1,000 pounds probably overkill, but if you make it such that it is rated or can hold 500 pounds indefinitely, then you should be fine. Okay, some other tools include a gauge bar. This is used to measure your rear end play, your giant snap ring pliers, some bushing tools, and then you have the adapter-case spanner socket for your output shaft nut. So I'm going to use that in a teardown inspection video. Don't use an impact with it like I've been doing. It kind of bends or damages the little spanner pins, and you'll need to replace them. They do make extras, so if you need to do that, you can. All right, as far as clutch module, the Borg Warner factory frictions for these are perfectly fine. They can take a lot of power, a lot of torque. It's well within the confines of the engineering design limits of the transmission and what the vehicle was able, designed to do, and what its abilities are. But we're going to actually upgrade the clutch module just because why not? We're going to be going with the Raybestos ZPG friction module. Okay, these frictions are a little bit more expensive than the Borg Warners, but this truck is constantly working and towing and hauling, so they weren't terribly more, in terms of the cost. So I figured I'd spring for it and, give him some upgraded frictions. This is actually a shop customer who sends me a lot of business, and the owner of the vehicle is my shop customer's uncle. So kind of doing him a solid with this. Like I said, just want to make sure that he is taken care of and that everything is good. So giving him a little bit of an upgrade as a token of appreciation. All right, let me move this further down the bench so we can talk a little bit about the rest of the transmission. I mean, to be honest, there's not a whole lot to discuss, but we'll cover a few things. All right, bushings. In these transmissions, I haven't seen enough of them to, indicate to me that they are brutally bad or hard on bushings like certain other units. Regardless, if you're going to R&R the bushings in these, you want to make sure that you have a very diverse selection of bushing pullers and drivers or driver sets. I think somebody on eBay makes a dedicated 6R140 bushing driver set, but offhand I don't know who it is, and I'm not going to commit to annotating or the video or putting anything in the description because I'm just thinking about it, but I could be wrong. So if you don't see anything either in the annotation here or in the description, then assume that I was, confused or making this up. Not that I would do that maliciously. I could have sworn I've seen a kit available, but I can't pin it down as far as the specifics. All right, we talked about planets. Front planet, rear planet are usually pretty resilient, as is the mechanical diode. If you do have to replace that diode, chances are you probably have to replace the planet. At least the damage was to the extent that the whole assembly is bad, and you would just replace it with a good used one from your hard part supplier or some online transmission supply place. Beyond that, just check and make sure it's good to go. One thing that I will stress to you if you're purchasing your kits in the aftermarket, and I've only used aftermarket overhaul kits with these, I've never actually purchased them from Ford, and that is all of your piston seals and your drum seals are all in one big bag together, except for two sets of seals, and that is a low reverse. Okay, so in fact, let me bring that stuff over here and I'll kind of talk through that a little bit, because the one thing you're going to want to make sure you do, unless you're super well versed in these things, is you want to keep all of your old seals in place through the cleaning process and not take them off until you are either ready to stage all your new seals and kind of make sure all your new seals are the equivalent of what's on there now, or you're actually going through the assembly process, just taking them off literally one by one and substituting as you're checking your new seals in your bag. So give me a second. All right, so here are a whole bunch of good used seals, and you're probably wondering why in the hell I even have good used seals. Frankly, for reference. I don't ever intend to reuse these seals unless somebody comes in and, you know, they're on a extremely tight budget and they need to get back on the road, and the overhaul kits are very expensive, and all if they need just 1 or 2 seals, maybe I could sell them 1 or 2 seals for basically nothing or just give them to them. But that's rare, especially owners of these vehicles. It's usually either, you know, relatively well-to-do private individuals or companies. But anyway, the point that I wanted to make here is that in the aftermarket overhaul kits, you're going to have 2 baggies for your low reverse piston and drum assembly. Okay, that thing takes 3 total seals, and there is an early design. So you see 725, 2011. 2011 was the first year of these transmissions. So you have basically 7 3/4 months worth of a very early design. That's actually here, sorry, prior to 725, 2011. And then you have a late design using units built after 725. So that's going to be like 99% of these transmissions. The rest of them come in this bag right here, just as you see them, except without all the labels. I actually labeled these so that I can use this for future reference. Every single seal is labeled for its respective location so I can map back. Now, once I've done enough of these to where it's second nature, then obviously I won't need this anymore, but I like to do it to keep a record so I can refer back to it, a physical record as opposed to like a photograph or something. I mean, some of you are probably thinking, "Oh my God, dude, you're nuts. You don't need to go to those extreme lengths." Well, I guess I don't need to, but maybe I feel I do. All right. When you're going back with the Ford, or I should say the 3.5R clutch drum, you will have had to index the relationship between the planet and your balance piston. And the basis for that is these little dots right here. Okay, right here. Those dots have to go back in the same location on the balance piston. And I indexed them with a scribe, and I also put paint pen. Okay, I already have all the new seals installed, so they're ready to go basically. That goes there. All right, 3.5R and 4.56 can be vulnerable in these units. So we have a steel module. I always recommend you replace all your steels in any heavy duty transmission. Reason being is that steels will wear just like frictions, and they will wear to the tune of anywhere from 1 to 3 thousandths of an inch over the course of the lifetime of a given transmission. So that doesn't sound like much at all, you know, on an individual level, but when you aggregate that over an entire clutch pack, especially one, say you have a variant that takes more frictions and steels than other variants of a given transmission or transmission family, you know, you're kind of adding up the delta between the combined thickness of the used steels and that thickness of the new steels. And so I always like to be on the lower side of spec when it comes to clutch clearance, so that gives plenty of room to grow, so to speak, and, you know, plenty of aging time in terms of miles for the unit before you know, it starts to become out of spec because there's too much clearance in the clutch, and you start seeing, you know, or experiencing drivability symptoms as a result of that growth. So that's why I like to install steel modules. And as a factory spec steel module, nothing fancy, we're not doing anything upgraded. You really don't need to unless you're pushing out stupid amounts of horse and torque. So my recommendation to you is to install a factory spec steel module. I think this one's made by Alto. Alright, let's move on down once again, and we'll discuss a couple other things toward the back of the case. I'll show you some selectives for the rear case travel check you'll need to do, and then we'll discuss the holding fixture and engine stand for this transmission. Okay, all these units, they take Mercon LV, so we have a little bit of Mercon LV fluid soaking the bearings. So you have bearings all throughout the transmission. What I really wanted to discuss was that rear end plate procedure. So you're going to use that gauge bar that you just saw a little bit a while ago on the other side of the bench in conjunction with a dial indicator. You're going to take two measurements at two different points in the case. You're going to take a measurement on the lugs of the mechanical diode, and then you're going to excuse me, move that dial indicator over to the center of the gauge, and you're going to take a measurement from that point on the gauge to the rearward-most sun gear's bearing race. Okay, that's what you see here. This is the rearward-most sun gear. Okay, I have the other front sun gear on the bench. I don't know why. But for the rear planet, you have the front sun gear, then you have the rear sun gear. The rear is the, you know, smaller of the two. Okay, you're going to take that measurement, and then you're going to basically subtract those numbers, and that's going to give you a value, and that value is going to correlate to a specific thickness of shim. Okay, these shims are all different thicknesses, different dimensions, and you want to be kind of very cognizant that you may have to, you know, mix and match if you're replacing anything in the rear gear train or the case itself. So if you're replacing the planet, you're replacing the sun gears, or you're replacing the case, you may have to use a different spacer or source a different spacer than what came in the transmission originally. So just be aware of that. All right. Hubs. Check them. The overdrive clutch hub in these ZF-based units can be vulnerable. Depends on, you know, what the specific transmission is and application, of course. But you know, you want to be cognizant of your hubs. The GM hubs and the medium-duty Ford, the 6R80, they can snap where the hub is kind of pressed or welded into the shaft itself. So just be aware of that. Check that on, you know, once you've cleaned it off after teardown. All right. What else? Okay, Adaptacase makes the sizing tools for the stator and the turbine shaft. So you have your turbine shaft sealing rings. 4 of them, they're Teflon. So you need an expander, and then you need a sizer. I actually don't have it on the bench right now. I spaced on putting it on there, but the stator is pretty much the same principle. These things are insanely expensive. I'm ashamed to admit how much I paid for them. In fact, I won't, but just know, because, you know, reason I'm saying that is because prices are kind of variable based on where you're going, or, you know, where you get your hard parts and tools. But suffice to say, be prepared to shell out more than $500 just for these 2 friggin' sizers. You can have a fabricator make them for you, or you can make them yourself out of bar stock if you're handy. You know, if you have a lathe and, you know, other relevant equipment, but I don't, so I just bought them. All right, let me reposition the camera so we can talk about the holding fixture and stand that I have for specifically just this transmission. All right, So as you can see, this transmission is like just outsized. I mean, it's almost larger than life. So if you're going to work on these units, you want to make sure that you have something sturdy that's structurally stable and strong enough to hold it in a position where you can load it. So the engine stand itself is made by a company called Norco, and they're out of San Bernardino, I think, or Ontario, somewhere down there in the Inland Empire in Southern California. And they have a specialized holding fixture that goes with this stand for the 6R80s. And that's that thing right there. So what I did is I had my fabricator more or less replicate that design, but scale it and size it so that it will work on these transmissions. And I instructed him to build this to hold up 500 pounds at least indefinitely. So you could put this thing fully loaded on the stand and have it sit there for 1,000,000 years, and nothing will happen to the transmission. So if you guys are interested, and either you're willing to drive to where I'm at, I'm in Vegas. I normally don't share that on YouTube, but I mean, I have my Facebook linked into my bio, so if you visit that page or shoot me a friend request, you'll learn that I'm based out of Las Vegas. So I guess I should probably, I shouldn't have any hang-ups about mentioning in videos. So anyway, point being is this: it doesn't have to be something like this, but it has to be something sturdy, something sound. Okay, that's all I'm really trying to drive at here. And so I actually loaded this case up when I got it with the entirety of the internals, not the specific ones on the bench over there, but from a core that I cleaned up, and there was no issues whatsoever. Now, how I load these cases is I actually orient the case at a 45-degree angle. Okay, just like this. At a 45-degree angle so that I can load all of these heavy sub-assemblies and have a much better leverage and control over each one. Now, Adapt-A-Case makes a little kind of connector fixture intended to be used with an overhead gantry crane or some sort of cable system to lower heavy loads, via a mechanical cable lift system. I don't have such a lift system in here. Maybe I'll put one in, but right now I don't have one. So what I do is I orient this so it's at a 45-degree angle, and that's how I load the case. And then once I have everything fully seated, I'll invert the case, situate the pump, because at this point all of the other components, including the giant front drum complex assembly, have been fully seated at their final rest position. So there I can simply install the pump carefully and know that everything will be fine. I won't cut sealing rings, I won't damage anything, and I especially won't hurt myself. That's the main thing with these transmissions. Okay, they are outsized, and I searched and searched and searched, and I could not find anyone that made a fixture for these units. 6R80s, Norco, OTC does make something, but it's like, I think it's a multi-purpose tool, and it's used in combination with engines as well as these transmissions. But I mean, it's stupidly expensive, and it's not even worth mentioning. So if you want one made, I guess reach out to me. I'll talk to my fabricator, see if it's something that he would explore doing. He said it was fairly straightforward to make, but making it as a one-off is one thing. Making it, for in a production sense is another. All right. Anyway, that's the video. I was planning to film this whole thing, but unfortunately, I just don't have the time. Time is kind of the essence. And for those that don't do YouTube themselves, and if you don't, nothing wrong with that at all. I'm just saying, just to give you a perspective, filming, at least for transmission building, adds about anywhere from 50 to 100% of the job time. Okay, so if it takes me 8 actual working hours to build a transmission from start to finish, let's just say, filming it from start to finish, we're looking at anywhere from 12 to 16 hours, and in some extreme cases where I screw up and I have to literally undo everything I just did so that it's not showing incorrect on camera. I mean, that you add another 20 or 25% depending on how egregious the mistake is. So if I get another 6R140 in here at the time of this filming, it's October 21st, 2024, I will go ahead and do a complete rebuild, and I will make sure that I have the time set aside for it. Alright, as always, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, go ahead and leave them below. If there's anything else you would like me to do as far as 6R140 video content other than a rebuild series, because like I said, that's already on my priority list, let me know in the comments and I will do what I can to make a video and publish it to the channel. As always, guys, take care. Enjoy the rest of your day or evening. Stay safe. Have a good one. Look forward to seeing you on the next one.